What's up, everybody? Turn God Possibilities here to give you the 400 sub special, finally. Sorry for the late upload. Also, sorry for not uploading what I've promised on the right time. Not uploading on time like I promised. I know y'all are probably tired of me giving excuses, so I won't give any and just say I'm extremely sorry. So yeah. But as you can tell from the title and possibly maybe the thumbnail, which it's either showing the thumbnail for the what if or, well, the picture you're seeing, the pic you're seeing right now. So yeah. And with that, let me explain. This is what if Asta and Yuno were the reincarnations of Ardyn and Noctis, the main protagonist and the main antagonist of Final Fantasy 15. If any of you who listen to my videos are Final Fantasy fans and played Final Fantasy 15, the game, y'all probably know what I'm talking about and have a rough estimate of what Asta and Yuno, their abilities will be, estimate of what abilities and equipment they will gain within this what if story. So yeah. But if anyone who hasn't played Final Fantasy 15 or watched the story, the gameplay of someone playing it on YouTube or something, haven't seen the actual gameplay, just, I don't know, just do whatever you want. You can watch this and just follow along or whatever, or go research or something, I don't know. But before we continue, I'm going to explain a few things. Both Asta and Yuno won't retain any memories or any abilities / powers from their past life, along with their extensive arsenal, until a certain point. And with that, let's get to the video. Now, we start our story off with right at the end of Final Fantasy 15 with Noctis releasing the Royal Arms along with the past kings to deal the final blow to Ardyn to finally put him to rest. Right as the final blow is dealt, both Ardyn and Noctis start to fade away, start to crumble apart and turn into crystalline, glass crystalline particles or whatever they were turning into when they started to just crumble, fall apart, and disappear. But before they completely disappear, Bahamut appears and waves his hand and releases a bright light on both of them, which both of them are passed out, are unconscious as they fall into, as they were disappearing. Bahamut says, "Is this outcome was our fault? Both of you deserve a second chance at life. Even you, Ardyn." That's when Bahamut waves his hand and both of them vanish, which he then finishes, "I hope you both can live freely in your new life, in a completely different world, away from all. He says, start a new life." in a world that's similar but at the same time not as your original. Which then he fades away, he disappears, and we change scenery to Asta and Yuno being dropped off at the church of Hodge Village, the church at Hodge Village. Which then the father opens the door and picks them up and does the same thing as in canon. Which, as he brings them in, we see a huge light in the background over the demon skull. A huge beam of light, which appears in an instant and disappears as quick as it came. Which surprisingly didn't catch the attention of anyone, except for maybe one person in the capital, the Wizard King at this time, the Wizard King, Julius, which he was out doing his usual thing, which he then sees the huge light, thinks, strange, what was that? But it doesn't really matter right now, until a later part, which we cut back to, which we time skip about 10 years or so. But before I explain that, let me explain a few things. Asta and Yuno, their personality, actually nope, not yet, not until, so yeah, we time skip about 10 years. Asta and Yuno, their development is pretty much the same. It's pretty much the same, except Yuno took an interest in trying to learn swordplay. He had some interest in joining in Asta's training regimen a little bit, but not enough to go gun-ho about it, because he wasn't a morning person. He wasn't that motivated, not that motivated like Asta was. But for Asta, he wasn't exactly the same either. Asta, it's pretty much the same, but he's a little more, well, what's the word? He's a little more just book smart. He does read and doesn't like, he doesn't like staying out too long, except when he's except when he's caught up in a training regiment. He doesn't like to spend the night in the woods. He's also a little more intuition because he sometimes has a somewhat fondness of reading books or whatever, and something like that, I think. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah. Which we time skip to about 10 years when they become 10, or sometime after they become 10 or something. Which Asta is doing his usual thing, trying to train and using a sword. Well, not a sword, he's using a stick to try to train with. Having a strange fondness to try to use swordplay, or try to just swinging something, which Yuno appears because the father told him it was getting late, and the father told Yuno to go fetch Asta for dinner. Which, as he appeared, Asta saw Yuno and asked if he could help him with something, which Yuno was somewhat compliant to help Asta a little bit, which Asta still doesn't have any magic in this. He does still have his wind magic and all. As soon as Asta asked Yuno if he could help him with his reflexes by shooting small bursts of wind magic at him. Yuno complies and does so, which a stray wind blast actually hits Asta and sends him flying into a bowl and onto a boulder, which then Yuno worries, panics and runs to Asta to see if he's okay. Which Asta says he gets up and just gives him a thumbs up saying he's alright. He says Yuno's wind match has gotten stronger or something. Something like that. But right as Asta gets up and says that, the boulder starts to crack and it splits in two from the force of Asta being knocked into it, which surprises Asta and Yuno a lot. Asta does have a few bruises because of that, being flung into it, but right as the boulder splits in two, they see a strange opening behind it. And Asta's curious to see what's both Asta and Yuno are curious to explore it. Which then, Yuno was trying to tell Asta, but we have to go. But then, right before he can say that, both Asta and Yuno see a strange light coming from this cave that was behind the boulder. Both Asta says, "Let's go check it out." Which both of them have a strange lure that's pulling them towards it. They have an unexplained allure that's pulling them towards the cave, to the light they saw. And Yuno forgets what he was saying, and when they do, Asta, takes them about a few minutes to travel through the cave, and they find, and as soon as they get to the end of it, they walk into a huge cavern, or huge room, which they see a hole in the ceiling, they say that's where the light came from, but as soon as they look down, as soon as they look ahead, they see Yuno looks to his right, and also looks to his left. They see a sword, they both see a huge sort of weapons. Sort of weapons on the left and right. Strangely enough, Yuno sees a strange sword with both a strange short sword or mid sword or whatever. As he looks at it, to us we know it as a sword. Noctis's father's sword, the sword of the father, which is titled. And we see to our left with Asta, he sees Ardyn's signature weapon, a large great sword, which I forgot the exact. I keep forgetting how to pronounce it. It starts with a R. I know that much. But as they go to reach out, which both Asta and Yuno reach out to grab both these swords, a huge light appears, which blinds Asta and Yuno, which then the weapons they see behind the sword that they were going to grab, along with the sword that both of them were going to grab, they start floating up and flying into both Asta and Yuno, which then they both fall to their knees in pain, grabbing their heads, thinking, and pass out. which we move to a different scene where they're both, Asta and Yuno, are having their own interactions. They're in with Asta being in a pure, reddish pinkish state, plane. He's floating or standing on nothing. He freaks out thinking, where the heck am I? Who? He tries to figure out what happened. He remembers trying to grab a sword, but then he sees a strange old man come up to him wearing a top hat and strange clothing. Says, nice to meet you. Or should Asta, in which, he's experienced the same thing, but his room is completely blue. The realm or plane he's in is completely blue, and he's meeting the 30-year-old version of Noctis when he died. Both of them give an explanation, which both of them aren't in the same place, but both Noctis and Ardyn give them an explanation saying, both of you, you are me, but you are not me at the same time. They pretty much give both Asta and Yuno a speech saying who they are and where they're from, and saying, you are the reincarnation of me. And they vanish, but right before both of them vanish, they say, live your life the way you wish. Do not let your past decide your fate. And do not let your past change your view of your family and of the ones you love or care about. Which that last bit both Ardyn and Noctis said at the same time, unknowingly, which they're pretty much in completely different planes or existence or something. As both of them fade away, Noctis turns into a strange short sword with an engine on it, which turns into crystalline version of it and flies straight into Yuno. As for Asta, it's Ardyn's sword and turns into the same thing and flies into Asta. Which then both of them wake up back at the church. Both of them wake up at the same exact time in the beds back at the church at Hodge Village, which Sister Lily walks in as both of them have set up and calls the father saying that Yuno and Asta have woken up, which they've been asleep for about a couple hours. They've been out of it for several hours, which prompt for the church and some of the villagers to search for them. Which it was Sister Lily who found Asta and Yuno. Went to the spot under the demon skull to check to see if they were there, and she found them in that cave. Though when they got there, the whole cave was empty, and took them. Which they say that they don't really give any explanation. They don't give they don't tell him what happened exactly, just say that they suddenly didn't feel so well and collapsed, which about an hour or two, Asta and Yuno get together and talk to each other. Yeah, try to get alone and talk to each other. Now, before I continue, let me explain a few things. Both Asta and Yuno have just now retained powers of Noctis and Ardyn, with Asta gaining a good some memories from Ardyn, saying he had memories of his past life, not all of them. Same goes for Yuno, as his life as Noctis. Though they have a good good bits and pieces of it to understand how they came to be here. Just gonna say that they don't have every bit of it, but they do have all of their powers. Asta has all of Ardyn's powers as well as his magic, which, think of it like this, all of his memories and magic and abilities were sealed inside of him from his past life, inside their bodies. Same goes for Yuno, but the magic powers he was born with in this life, weren't sealed at all. But now, with them being, those powers and magic being released from them, they have a lot. Yuno having a little more than Asta, since he already had magic from this world he was born with. As for Asta, he had none, just like Canon. But now, Asta has his own magic, which we now go back to about the conversation they were about to talk to each other about, asking, "Did you see what I saw?" Saying that he experienced something, which both of them explain to each other what they experience. Both of them come to the realization that the other is the reincarnation of someone. The reincarnation of with Yuno being the reincarnation of the true king of another world, and Asta being the forsaken king, essentially speaking. Betrayed king, or whatever. But Yuno's the one who speaks up, saying, "Whatever happened in that life, it will not affect me and what I feel right now. I am Yuno, not Noctis, but he then says, I forgive no matter what you did in the past life, Asta. I forgive you." Asta slash Ardyn, or whatever, it somewhat tears up, and says, "Thank you." Which then, we time skip about a few years, but we give a brief explanation past 5 years. Both Asta and Yuno start training their newly acquired powers. I'll explain Yuno's if you've never played the Final Fantasy, if none of you have played Final Fantasy before, which I'll explain the powers that both of them would have, actually, and that both of them gain the same exact power. So yeah, both of them have the power of the kings, able to store and utilize utilize a sort of weapons that is stored within their, you could say, pocket dimension. Which is a whole bunch. And this story, I'm gonna give Asta and Yuno the same weapons that same whatever they had stored in their past life. It's still there, meaning they still have access to the same whatever items, weapons, and equipment they had in their past life, clothing, weapons, medicine, drinks, food. It's perfectly preserved and stored within their own pocket space. The only thing that wasn't there was the royal arms that both of them had. Hence why they found them in the cave under the demon skull, which for Asta they were able to do during the training the past 5 years. They practiced their warp strikes. It's their warp strike. When they throw a weapon they have, they're able to teleport or / warp to it. Instantly warp to it, using a little bit of their magic though. But it isn't a problem for both of them, especially Yuno, who has now even more wells of magic of what he had in previous canon, what he had in canon. As for us, which both Asta and Yuno can call upon the same powers of the king, as well as utilize the royal arms, and Armagus, which is able to utilize every single royal arms they had in tandem, and they can pretty much do a lot of things. It gives them the power to levitate, control the weapons at ease or whatever. It gives them boosted speed, as well as the phase through solid matter. So yeah, but for the difference between what they gained from their past life is the other magic abilities they gained. For from Noctis, gained the power to. He retained the power to absorb elemental magic or power and store it within magic flasks to create essentially artificial spells, in Black Clover terms. Can absorb different types of elemental magic, only ice, fire, and lightning, and transfer the said elemental magic power into magic flash, creating a somewhat magic grenade / artificial spell. But as for Asta, he gained a bunch of magic abilities. Like, he can utilize fire, ice, and lightning magic freely, without the use of magic flask or whatever, or needing to absorb it. He can cast himself, as well as he can use dark magic, which he can also use the Ardyn's ability to create somewhat of an illusion within others' sight, making other people look like him, and he can take the form of someone else, essentially speaking. So yeah, he can create illusions to change himself and change others' point of view, essentially speaking. Which, because of this, it pretty much made but by the knowledge he gained from he's read, which Asta, he sticks with just showing one type of magic, which is I guess fire magic, you could say. He uses it frequently, saying he finally awakened his magic, which the whole Hot Village was proud, especially the father and sister Lily, along with the other, orphans at the church. They were proud of Asta for finally awakening magic or something, or gaining magic. Though him and Yuno don't tell the church, the people at the church, about what happened that night 5 years ago. Also, Yuno continued to train, but their training was somewhat intensified, which Yuno doesn't really like to train that much in the morning. As for Asta, he doesn't really like to train that much at night. Doesn't really like to camp or something. I think Ardyn didn't. Well, both Asta and Yuno, both Ardyn and Noctis, I don't think either of them like camping. I'm not exactly sure. I tried looking up, but anyways. As time goes on, both of them continue to train and practice their newly acquired, reacquired powers from their past life, as well as practice their handling of the royal arms and other weapons that they regained from their somewhat pocket dimension, where they hold all their weapons and lots of other stuff. So yeah, that's essentially, I think that's going to be it for part 1. So yeah. Hope you guys like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and press that little bell down there for to get straight away notifications for my next video. And also, the part 2 will be coming out right after this, most likely. Also, after part 2, there will be a few other, about 2 or 3 other what ifs will be uploaded. About maybe in between 30 minutes or so, or an hour, give or take. I'm still learning a few things from trying to slowly learn how to use to upload videos, to set them up or whatever. So yeah, hope you guys like, comment down below, tell me what you think, and share my content with anyone you think would like any of my content. So yeah, see you later. Bye.